It was spring 2011 when I entered New York City, those big conference rooms of the United Nations. And I was there entering the iconic scene of all the flags of the nation states hanging in a row. And when I entered the security check, I entered the conference building and saw all these portraits of former world leaders hanging proudly on the wall. And I was so excited to finally be there at the United Nations, where all the world leaders would come together to solve the global challenges of our time. I was only 25 years old, and I got just elected as the new youth representative on sustainable development to the United Nations. 25 years. It's over 10 years ago, and it was years before I became a mom of my 3-year-old, and I was definitely not 37 weeks pregnant, as I am today. My name is Liset, and I come from a small village in the south of the Netherlands, in Limburg, where I grew up. And I had a wonderful youth. I thought there was no problem in the world at all. It was not until I entered my college room here in Utrecht University, where I studied environmental studies, where I got presented these exponential graphs, and you probably know them. Population growth, deforestation, pollution at an accelerating rate. And I was shocked by the magnitude of these problems, but also about the fact that I only learned about them in university, after 18 light-hearted years. And there I was, at the United Nations, where I thought, this is the place where I can make the difference and where the problems will be solved. And so I entered the conference room, and I saw all these middle-aged men in gray suits, ready to negotiate about sustainable development. And with the youth attending, we followed the negotiations closely. And we were really excited to finally be there after 2 weeks of lobbying at the end day on the Friday to hear the conclusion of the agreement. And the negotiations that day went on forever, until 5 a.m. in the morning. Some of the diplomats were even sleeping in their chairs. But we weren't. We were on the tip of our chair to listen what was going on. And it was hard to follow. So when the conference finally came to a conclusion, we had to ask, what happened? What was the outcome of the conference? And they told us, there's no agreement. No agreement? No, because a conflict interfered into the negotiations. It was something to do with Israel-Palestine conflict, nothing to do with sustainability or the climate, and therefore the agreement went to trash. And there I was, with all my hopes based on the United Nations, and it was nothing. So it got me even more worried, because who will take care of our climate? Who will make sure that we don't exceed our planetary boundaries? If not these governments, who is taking care of humanity and tackling those problems? Well, 2 years of those conferences followed, and as a Dutch youth representative, I ran around these conferences, making the most impact we could, learning lots of lessons, but also a lot of disappointments followed. Luckily, in the meantime, in 2012, a new movement stood up. Students in the United States. And they were also deeply worried about the climate crisis, just as I did. But these students, they weren't talking about using 1 or 2 more plastic cups or having a shorter shower. No, these students were asking their university boards to divest from some of the most powerful companies in the world, the fossil fuel industry. And these students started a movement, and it's called the Fossil-Free Divestment Movement. And they based their ideas on this new research that had been published back then. And they introduced the concept of the carbon bubble. Researchers in the UK calculated how much CO2 we can still emit while staying in a safe limit of a livable planet, below the 2 degrees Celsius. on the one hand. And on the other hand, they calculated how much all the oil, coal, and gas companies, all the fossil fuel companies in the world, were planning to burn if they would implement their plans. And what they found was shocking. These companies, these fossil fuel companies, were planning to burn 5 times as much fossil fuels as would be safe within the limits of a livable planet. And if you realize how powerful these companies are, you realize the magnitude of this problem. These companies have been successfully lobbying our governments and also misleading us with their green marketing. So fortunately, this movement stood up. And not only in the United States, it worked. More and more groups joined the fight. And also, it spread throughout the world. Not only in the US, but also Australia, New Zealand, and in Europe. And also in the Netherlands, we got inspired. Together with a group of students and the Dutch NGO Agenda, we brought the movement to the Netherlands. And only a couple months later, the NGO that started this movement, 350.org, created one position in the Netherlands to support this movement. I applied. And from that moment onwards, it was my job to build the fossil-free movement in the Netherlands. And we started at universities, just like in the United States. But we quickly figured out that our universities don't have such large investments as in the US. We have a very different system. But we quickly figured out that our university teachers and professors, they are obliged to build up their pension with the ABP. And not only teachers, but everyone working in the public sector in the Netherlands, they have no free choice. They have to build up and hand in a part of their salary to the ABP every month. Meaning this is a huge pot of money, and meaning the ABP is one of the biggest financial institutions in the world. So the choice was quickly made. We were going to focus on the ABP. It's the abbreviation for Algemeen Burgerlijk Pensioenfonds, for the Dutch among you. And so we started. We wrote our first letter, and we were quickly invited into the meeting, into the boardroom. But in this first meeting, they laughed at us. They told us, yeah, sustainability is really important. I drive a Tesla myself, the board member proudly said, you know. But the carbon bubble and divestment, no, I never heard of that. You know, go play outside. Don't bother us with this. So we went outside, but we started campaigning, of course. And we set up a petition. And exactly 1 year later, we entered the same boardroom. This time, we had a very different conversation. Our petition had over 10,000 signatures. We were broadcasted on television. And this time, we entered the boardroom also with a TV crew of Tegenlicht documentary. And this time, they asked us, but who are you? And what do you want from us? And by the way, we changed our policies. We have a CO2 target now, and sustainability had become one of their topics. But still, we keep our investments in fossil fuels. So already with a very small group of pension participants, we had influenced this ABP. But of course, they kept their fossil investments. The years that followed were quite a bit harder, but the movement grew and broadened, and we started fossil-free groups all over the Netherlands. But it was so hard to keep the pressure on this big financial institution. But in 2018, something changed. In the meantime, we were able to register an entity and set up a team. Up until that moment, it was just me, surrounded by amazing volunteers. But this time, we'd been able to raise funds and actually set up a team of colleagues. And with this team, we concluded, with the urgency of the climate crisis raging on, we have to focus our efforts. There's no time to lose, but we also have to aim high. We cannot just, focus on those shorter showers or something. So, what we said, we consulted our network, and we made a decision. We decided to again focus on the ABP all our efforts on the ABP. We decided to relaunch our campaign to not let go until they had divested from the fossil fuel industry. And that's what we did. October 2020, together with the Teachers for Climate, pension participants, we relaunched the campaign. And we set up meetings, meetups, we connected pension participants with each other, and we created facts and figures to give all those groups a head start. And when these groups started, more and more people joined the campaign, starting with the municipality officials in Amsterdam, quickly followed by the water authorities, and also the civil servants in The Hague joined the campaign. And everyone did it in their own way. Some set up a petition, some started research, lobbying, actions, different things happened. It grew out to be a real movement. At some point also, the young people, who you think, pensions, boring, but even the young people from Fridays for Future joined the campaign. And also the Scientists for Future started producing reports about it. And also, at some point, the pension participants active with Extinction Rebellion started organizing sit-ins in the lobby of the ABP. Even after all this pressure, the ABP did not seem to listen. Even all the pressure from their own pension holders. So that summer, we decided, together with the pension participants, we're going to go a step further. We're going to go to court. We're going to bring the ABP to court for a lawsuit to make them fossil-free. And then it was October 26th of 2020. And we were in full preparation mode for this lawsuit. That Friday, we were going to hand over the summons to the ABP. And we were, just a small organization, a team of 3 people. So we were running around like crazy. And that morning on the Tuesday, we opened up our inbox. And there it was. An email from the ABP themselves with the announcement. We will divest from all fossil fuel companies within 1.5 years. Exactly the demand that we had been asking them for since 2014. After 7 years of campaigning, they exactly said, we will indeed withdraw all our holdings in oil, coal, and gas companies within 1.5 years. Amazing. With all these groups of pension participants, people like you and me, we influenced one of the largest financial institutions of the world. And they even admitted that it also was because of the pressure we organized. And the news had a ripple effect. The news traveled internationally all over the world. And suddenly, other pension funds had to defend why they kept their investments in fossil fuels instead of the other way around. So yes, we celebrate it, of course. But still, the climate crisis is still raging on. We see the devastating effects every day in the news. And the time we have to act, the time window is closing fastly. So we may never underestimate the power we have as individuals, as students, workers, citizens. We can achieve so much more than we think we can. So therefore, with Fossielvrij, we are now starting campaigns targeting the banking sector and the aviation industry. I'm really hopeful that together with a people-powered movement, we can hold those big companies and financial institutions accountable. A beautiful planet is within our reach. A beautiful planet with renewable energy, locally produced, is within our reach. If we organize together, if we escalate strategically, if we keep our focus and never, ever give up. Thank you.
For you,